As the field school component of this course becomes a memory, I've been reflecting on how this bus tour reshaped my understanding of the Japanese-Canadian internment experience. Before the tour, my knowledge came mainly from reading books and listening to podcasts. While useful for learning facts and dates, they didn't convey the resilience and strength of interned Japanese-Canadian communities during their first uprooting by the government. Through guided tours, museum visits, and conversations at internment sites, I gained a more personal and holistic understanding of their lives. I was especially moved by the mindset of Japanese Canadians, rooted in hard work, creativity, and innovation. These values helped communities survive, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. This resilience connects to shikara ganai, a Japanese philosophy I learned from my peers, meaning that we must do what we can, even without full control of our circumstances. In my photojournal, I want to explore the large and small acts of innovation that contributed not only to the survival of Japanese Canadians, but also their long-term success. I chose a video journal because I've always loved oral storytelling. It was central to our learning, and I wanted my reflections to echo that same spirit. While the challenges of exile forced communities to find new ways to cope with the internment experience, our visit to Steveston made it clear that this creativity and innovation existed well before the internment period. I loved hearing about the ingenuity of Japanese Canadian communities in Steveston, particularly how boat makers adapted traditional Japanese boat building practices to the new coastal environment. By altering their techniques and materials, they mastered boat building in British Columbia. Despite facing discrimination and racism in the pre-war period, it was impressive to see how Japanese Canadians found success and gained respect through their innovation and creativity. Reflecting on the sights from the bus tour, Hastings Park still stands as the most jarring. I found the wide, expansive buildings cold and harsh, and learning about the living conditions of Japanese Canadians in the initial phases of the internment was quite upsetting. Photographs from this period made it hard to imagine how anyone could find hope in such an environment, and yet it was inspiring to learn that internees set up services for each other. Some opened shoe repair shops, as shown in this photo, and others altered their teaching practices to ensure that kids and teenagers received an education. I found visiting Tashmeet equally as shocking as our visit to Hastings Park, though in different ways. Learning about internees who lived in shacks and tents during the cold Canadian winters was heartbreaking. The reconstructed buildings and museums made that reality even more tangible. I was struck by the fact that the shoyu factory wasn't a top-down decision, but an initiative started by internees who sought out government approval to create industry in their camp. Profits from the factory, which shipped products across the country, were used to support the community, which I found quite inspiring.
I was the first grandchild. In September 1970,
Gardening also played a key role in community well-being. In Tashmi, we passed by fuki plants, originally planted by Japanese Canadians to ensure that they would always have a sustainable food source. It's amazing to think that, despite not knowing where they were going or that they wouldn't return home, they brought seeds from a plant that would both nourish them and connect them to their roots. As we discussed this as a group, I couldn't help but think of Asayo Murakami's garden in Steveston, and how Japanese Canadians brought beauty, nutrients, and familiarity by gardening in these new locations to build a home.
places that used to hold so many bad memories for her. Our trips to Telegraph Cove and Hastings Park were supposed to have been the end of the journey to tell the story about how the
After the intensity of day 2, our visit to Greenwood felt like a moment of relief. Once a mining town turned ghost town, Greenwood became a refuge for exiled Canadians, with housing, welcoming civilians, and even a mayor who supported the internees. Greenwood showed the possibilities of community, arts, and culture when Japanese Canadians were not struggling to stay warm and fed. In the museum, I enjoyed reading about the sewing club, formed by 30 women who used their machines to make fishnets, clothing, blankets, and novelties. This wasn't just a creative expression, but it was also industry, productivity, and resilience.
He suffered the most from the measures taken against the Japanese Canadians. Tadao had childhood glaucoma. Prior to the war, he'd been receiving medical treatment to preserve.
While walking through the Nikkei Internment Memorial Center in New Denver, this series of images caught my attention. The last thing I expected coming into this field school was the prevalence of the performing arts in internment life. Yet, throughout the province, internees use their limited resources to create costumes, paint backdrops, and rehearse plays, providing entertainment, distraction, and joy to their communities. These performances acted as resistance to cultural assimilation, preserving tradition, passing them down to younger generations.
Canadians accepted the offer. With no possibility of resuming his work on the coast as a fisherman, my great-grandfather believed that he
This photograph shows an ufuro, a Japanese communal bath made by Japanese-Canadian carpenters during the internment period. Building ufuros in internment sites was a way to bring Japanese culture and comforts into their spaces. I read on a sign in the NIMC that the ufuro symbolizes both physical and mental rejuvenation. So in a sense, building Japanese bathhouses in internment sites across the province was a way to protect the mental health of internees. Walking into this wooden space, I felt serene, as if the intentions of the creator that were built into the room and the wooden panels continue to hold this energy today.
So not only was I surprised to find out that Tadao was still alive in Japan, I was shocked to learn that until recently my grandmother had kept in touch with Tadao by mail.
Another aspect of the internment period that I found surprising was the presence of happy childhood memories. While eating lunch on Wednesday, Jim Miyazaki sat down with us and shared his fond memories of growing up in Kaslo. He spoke about how happy he was to be surrounded by so many children to play with, and his adventures sneaking into the movie theater. One story really stood out to me. Japanese Canadians weren't allowed to fish in Kaslo, so Jim and his friends used their mother's sewing needles to make fishing hooks and tied them to wooden sticks to create fishing rods. I loved hearing about the ingenuity of these children, using any materials that were available to them to create some fun and maintain certain practices, like fishing. Walking through the exhibit in the main room of the Langham Cultural Center, I was struck by the simplest form of creativity. A row of drawings hung up on the wall created by the third grade class of 1943. These drawings acted kind of like a reminder that these were just kids. They played and drew with crayons. Although their childhoods were shaped by displacement, the hard work of their parents and communities allowed them to have a positive childhood. You would think that the lives of intervenees would be completely flipped on their heads during this period, but at the end of the day, people adapt and nest in new locations. Children play, learn, draw, and this was a powerful testament to the ability of the Japanese community to build a home in new locations.
30 years after his death, through his carefully organized photographs and films,
While sitting on the bus driving away from Lillooet, a book was passed around about Tukataro Tsuyuki and the creation of a tomato industry in Lillooet. His expertise and knowledge in farming blew me away as he was able to work around the discriminatory laws that would limit the movement of Japanese Canadians. Confined to one side of Lillooet's bridge, Japanese Canadians found a way to create life, food, jobs in such a dry and unforgiving environment. Tsuki built greenhouses, co-ops, collection and distribution systems, a cannery, and even taught former fishermen how to farm. Tsuki didn't just provide food. He also helped people reclaim their agency by setting up a whole community of people who used to only know how to survive on the coast to be able to work the land and create their own businesses.
my grandmother's older brother. Of all of my grandmother's family, he suffered the most from the measures taken against the Japanese.
Ultimately, the acts of making and creating were central to maintaining the spiritual, emotional, and physical well-being of internees. Whether it was creating industry in camps like Tashmi and Lillooet, building comforts like ufuros, or repurposing everyday objects as we saw with Jim Miyakase's fishing rods, these actions allowed communities to survive, and in many cases thrive. As I reflect on the immense forms of creativity and innovation, I also want to recognize the role of artistic practices in educating Canadians today. We retell these stories through oral histories, literatures, community gardens, museum exhibits, plays, film, and songs, forms all inspired by the actions of internees themselves. It's amazing to see how this history was captured through art. Muriel Kitagawa's poetic writing conveys first-hand experiences, and photographers like Tom Matsumi snuck cameras into camps to document life in their own ways. While this was overall a very dark period in Canadian history, the strength of Japanese Canadians and their actions within internment camps demonstrates that they refused to be victims. They worked tirelessly to build lives for themselves and their families, and that, to me, is incredibly honorable.